Every Tuesday for 40 years, my wife went to the beach. Same departure time. Same faded sunhat. Same canvas bag that always smelled faintly of coconut oil and pennies. She would kiss my cheek like it was any other day, say she'd be back before lunch, and drive off with the calm certainty of someone following a map only she could see. And I let her. Then she died, and the first thing I found was proof that I never knew where she was going. My name is Darius Cole. I'm the kind of man who notices patterns. I build my life on them. Wake at 5. Coffee first, talk later. Keys always in the same ceramic bowl. Bills paid the day they arrive. I don't like surprises. But my wife, Elara, lived with one secret that ran like a hidden current beneath everything we built. I didn't know that until the morning after the funeral, when the house still smelled like lilies and sympathy. People think grief arrives like thunder. For me, it arrived like dust. It settled on the furniture. It dulled the light. It made the air heavy. Even the walls felt quieter, like they were holding their breath. I stood in our bedroom and looked at her side of the dresser. The top drawer was slightly open, like she'd meant to close it and forgot. That alone was wrong. Elara closed everything. Always. I should have walked away. Instead, I pulled it open. Socks. Scarves. A small tin of mints she never ate. Then, at the very back, taped under the wood where a hand wouldn't casually reach, there was an envelope. It wasn't pretty. No ribbon. No seal. It looked like it had been handled by nerves. Salt had dried in pale crust along one edge, as if it had been pressed against damp skin and then forgotten. My fingers hesitated before I peeled it free. Inside were two things. A beach parking receipt, dated last Tuesday. And a note, written in Elara's neat slanted handwriting, the kind that used to label our spice jars. 3 words. Don't let him see. I read it again. Slower. Don't let him see. My heart didn't race. It went cold. Because him wasn't me. If it was me, she would have written my name. Or she would have written you. But she didn't. I sat on the edge of our bed with that receipt and those 3 words in my hand, and a strange thought slid into my mind like a knife. If she was protecting something from him, then for 40 years she had been walking into danger with a smile. I looked down at the receipt. Seabright Public Shore. Lot C, 9:12 a.m. Seabright was 40 minutes away, not counting traffic. Not the closest beach. Not the prettiest. Not the one people bragged about. It was the one with dunes tall enough to hide a person standing just a few steps away. I thought about every Tuesday. Every calm goodbye. Every see you soon. My jaw tightened so hard my teeth ached. I didn't call my sister. I didn't call our friends. I didn't call anyone. I grabbed my keys and drove like the world had narrowed to one thing, that lot. On the way, the radio tried to fill the silence. I turned it off. I needed to hear my own thoughts. They weren't kind. Maybe she had another life. Maybe she had another man. Maybe she was meeting someone who made her feel young again while I stayed home building a routine around a marriage that existed only in my head. But the note didn't read like romance. It read like warning. When I reached Seabright, the ocean smell hit me before I even parked. Salt and seaweed and sunscreen, mixed with the metallic bite of wind. The sky was bright, the kind that makes the water sparkle. It should have been beautiful. It felt like a stage. I stepped out of the car and the lot heat rose through my shoes. Families unloaded coolers. Kids ran with sand buckets. A couple argued over umbrellas like their day depended on it. Normal people. Normal lives. And me, walking toward a truth my wife had buried under 40 years of Tuesdays. I kept the envelope in my pocket, my fingers curled around it like it could anchor me. Near the boardwalk entrance was a lifeguard stand. The lifeguard on duty wasn't the tan teenager type. This man was older, broad-shouldered, with a sun-worn face and a posture that didn't relax even when nothing was happening. He looked up as I approached. His eyes locked on mine and didn't move. I hadn't said a word yet. He said it first. "You're late." The sentence landed like a slap. I stopped so abruptly my heel scraped the pavement. "Excuse me?" He didn't blink. He didn't smile. He just squinted like he was studying a familiar crack in a wall. "You're late," he repeated, slower. "She usually got here before 9. My throat went tight. "You know my wife?" He glanced at my pocket, not my face. Like he knew exactly what I was carrying. Then he nodded toward the dunes. "Third bench," he said. "Far side. Past the warning sign." "What warning sign?" I asked. He leaned forward, lowering his voice in a way that made my skin prickle. The one nobody reads until it matters. My mouth went dry. Why would my wife? She didn't come to swim, he cut in. She came to sit. I stared at him. The sound of the ocean surged behind my ears like blood. How long? I asked. He hesitated. Just long enough to confirm my worst fear. Longer than you think. Then he added the line that cracked something open inside me. And she always said you'd come alone. My hand tightened around the envelope in my pocket. Alone. She expected this. She planned for it. That meant whatever she was doing at this beach, it wasn't going to end with her. It was going to land on me. If you want the next reveal, subscribe now to don't miss the moment everything flips. I forced myself to breathe. In through the nose. Out through clenched teeth. Who is he? I asked. The lifeguard's gaze drifted over my shoulder, scanning the crowd. I don't get names, he said. I get problems. And yours is walking around like a ghost. Then he nodded once, sharp. Go. Before he notices you noticed. I turned toward the beach. The sand was hot and fine, slipping under my shoes. The farther I walked, the less the families mattered. The noise thinned. The air felt sharper. Wind tugged at my shirt like it wanted me to turn back. Ahead, the dunes rose like walls. A posted sign stood crooked in the sand. Keep out. Dune restoration. No trespassing. I kept walking. Because grief had already taken what it could. Now something else wanted the rest. Past the sign, the beach changed. The sand became softer, pocked with footprints that didn't look like kids running. The dunes blocked the view of the lot, the boardwalk, the lifeguard stand. It felt like stepping behind the curtain of a play. Then I saw the benches. 1, 2, and the third. It faced the ocean, angled slightly away from the footpath like it was meant for privacy. The wood was weathered gray, etched with old scratches. The kind of bench that remembers. Someone stood beside it. A man. Not tall. Not short. Wearing a dark windbreaker even though the sun was bright. Hands in his pockets like he belonged there. Like he had all the time in the world. And in one hand, he held something familiar. A faded sunhat. Ilara's sunhat. My chest went tight, and my body did something strange. It didn't panic. It froze. Because suddenly every Tuesday replayed in my mind like a reel. The hat, the bag, the calm goodbye. She wasn't going to the beach to relax. She was going to report in. The man turned his head slightly, just enough for me to see his profile. Then he lifted the hat a little, like he was weighing it. He looked toward the water, not at me, and spoke as if he'd been waiting for me to arrive. Took you long enough, he said. I swallowed. Who are you? He turned fully then, and his eyes settled on me with the confidence of someone who has already won. He smiled. Not warm. Not friendly. Like a man greeting a consequence. And then he said the one thing no stranger should ever say. Come closer, D. Nobody calls me D. Not anymore. Not since I was a kid. Not since my father used it, before he disappeared and left my mother to raise me on apologies and half-truths. My stomach dropped. My wife had been hiding this from me, for 40 years. And whoever this man was, he didn't just know her. He knew me. If you're still watching and not subscribed, tell me why did I read every comment? I took one step forward, then another, the sand dragging at my feet like it wanted to hold me back. The man lowered the hat onto the bench carefully, almost respectfully. She told me you'd look like that, he said. Like a man who thought love was the whole story. My voice came out rough. Where is my wife's bag? He tilted his head. You don't start with that question. What question should I start with? I snapped. He smiled again, wider this time. The one you're afraid of. Then he reached into his windbreaker and pulled out a thin plastic sleeve. Inside was a photograph. It was old, slightly faded. A beach shot. A woman with a sunhat sitting on this very bench. Ilara. But she wasn't alone. Beside her sat a child. A little boy with dark hair and a familiar face. My face. The man held the photo up between us like a weapon. Your wife didn't come here every Tuesday to hide from you, he said softly. She came here every Tuesday, to protect you. My hands went numb. The ocean roared. And the story I thought I lived cracked open. Because the photo wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what he said next. You want to know why she wrote, "Don't let him see"? He tapped the photo with one finger. She wasn't talking about me. He leaned closer, his voice dropping into something colder. She was talking about your son. And my blood turned to ice. The ocean kept moving behind me, steady and indifferent, while my mind tried to catch up. The man at the third bench held my wife's hat like it belonged to him. Like 40 years of Tuesdays had been his schedule, not hers. And when he said my childhood name, it didn't just unsettle me. It rewired the past in real time. Then he showed me that photo. Ilara on the bench. A little boy beside her. My face on a child's body. And he said, she wasn't talking about me. She was talking about your son. I didn't answer him. I couldn't. My mouth felt full of sand. Because the truth is, I don't have a son. Ilara and I tried. We tried in quiet ways and loud ways. We tried until the trying turned into a topic we avoided, like a crack in the ceiling you stop looking at because it makes you tired. We never had children. We never adopted. We never even had a serious conversation about fostering because the grief of it sat between us like a third person. So when he said your son, it wasn't information. It was a weapon. It was a way to see if I'd flinch. And I did. The man watched my face like a doctor watching a patient's pupils. You don't have a son, I said finally, my voice scraped raw. He smiled like he'd won something small but important. Not on paper. What do you want? I asked. He leaned back, staring past me toward the bright line where water met sky. I wanted to see if she told you anything before she went. She's dead, I snapped, and the words felt like breaking glass. He shrugged. People die. Payments don't. My pulse hammered at my throat. What payment? He lifted his shoulders, slow and casual. Ask her notebook. My hands clenched. I don't know what you're talking about. He stood, brushed sand from his palms, and set the hat on the bench again with that same careful respect. Like the hat was sacred. Like my wife had been sacred to him in a way she never was to me. She was always early, he said. Always prepared. Always careful. He looked at me then, directly, and his eyes weren't angry. They were amused. But you, he added softly, you look like a man who never asked a single hard question. The insult should have made me swing at him. It should have made me shout. Instead, it landed because it was true. I took one step forward. Tell me who him is. His smile faded into something flatter. You'll know soon enough. Then he nodded once, like ending a conversation he'd already finished in his head. He walked away, cutting across the sand toward the dune line, and within seconds, the dunes swallowed him. No dramatic vanishing. No magic. Just a man disappearing into a place that made it easy. I stood alone at the third bench, staring at my wife's hat like it might start talking if I stared long enough. A gust of wind flipped the brim slightly. Underneath, tucked into the inner band, was a folded strip of paper. My fingers moved before my brain gave permission. I pulled it out. One line. A date. A time. And an address I recognized even before I finished reading it. Tuesday. 9 p.m. home. Don't bring anyone. My own address. I didn't feel fear right away. I felt insulted. Like my home had been entered without knocking. Then the fear came. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind that tightens your skin. On the drive back, the road felt longer than it ever had. Every car behind me felt like it was following too close. Every red light felt like a trap. I kept checking the rearview mirror like a man trying not to be surprised by his own life. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the house looked normal. Too normal. The windows reflected late afternoon light. The front steps were still swept, like Ilara might come out and scold me for tracking sand inside. But Ilara was gone. And in the silence she left behind, everything suddenly had room to become something else. Inside, the air was cool. Still. The kind of stillness that makes you hear small things you normally ignore. I walked straight to the spare room where Ilara kept her beach things. I didn't know why. Something in me had decided that if the truth lived anywhere, it lived near her Tuesdays. The cabinet stood against the wall. It was unlocked. My stomach dropped. Ilara locked it every Tuesday when she returned. I used to tease her about it. What are you hiding? I'd joke. She'd smile without warmth and say, nothing you need to worry about. The key had always been on her ring. Now the cabinet door sat slightly ajar, like someone had been inside and didn't care enough to pretend they hadn't. I pulled it open. Towels. A faded blanket. A plastic bottle of sunscreen so old the label was peeling. Then, behind the towels, a metal box. No lock. No label. The box was cold against my palms as I lifted it. It felt heavier than it should have. Inside was a notebook, thick and swollen, the edges warped like it had been kissed by seawater 100 times. I opened it carefully. The first page made my throat tighten. Tuesday. June 12. Tide, 10:40 am. Lot seat at third bench paid. I turned the page. Tuesday again. And again. 40 years of Tuesdays stared up at me like an accusation. Coordinates. Tide times. Weather notes. Sometimes a sentence. He watched today. He's getting bolder. Don't look at him. Paid again. The writing was Alara's, but the voice didn't sound like the woman I lived with. This voice was smaller. Tenser. Like someone living with a countdown. I sat down on the floor, the notebook open on my lap, and flipped faster. Years blurred. Tuesday, Tuesday, Tuesday. Like a heartbeat. Then I hit a page with a line that punched the air out of me. Darius smiled today. He doesn't know. My fingers froze on the paper. She wrote about me like I was a stranger. Not cruelly. Protectively. That hurt more than cruelty would have. I kept going, chasing the end like a man chasing a moving car. Near the back, the handwriting tightened. Became sharper. Less patient. He asked questions. He's watching the house. I can't let him speak to Darius. There it was again. Him. Not a lover. Not a friend. A shadow. Then I reached the final page. Last Tuesday. 3 days before she died. Tuesday tide, 11:05 am. Lot seat at third bench last payment. It's over. If he comes, give him the hat and tell him to look under the drawer. I stared at that line until my vision blurred. Look under the drawer. That was how I found the envelope. That was how I ended up at the bench. Elara built a trail for me. Not a romantic one. A controlled one. A trail that started at the beach and led straight into my living room. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. I snapped my head up. The house had been empty when I came in. I was sure of it. The creak came again. Slow. Not a settling sound. Not the house breathing. A step. My hands tightened around the notebook. I didn't stand. I didn't shout. I listened. Another step, closer, then a pause like whoever it was had heard my breathing. My heart beat once, hard. And I realized something that made my skin go cold. If that man from the beach knew about the notebook, then someone else did too. And Elara had been trying to keep him from seeing something. Maybe the notebook. Maybe me. Or maybe the moment I'd finally open it. The doorknob to the spare room moved. Just a fraction. As if someone on the other side was testing whether it was locked. It wasn't. The door began to open. And the notebook slipped from my hands onto the floor, splaying open on a page Elara wrote years ago. If I stop, he will come for Darius. The door opened only a hand's width. Then stopped. Like whoever stood there wasn't ready to be seen yet. My lungs refused to fill properly. My fingers searched the floor for something solid, something I could use, and closed around the edge of the metal box. It wasn't a weapon, but it was weight. It was something. I held it tight and stared at the crack in the doorway. Nothing moved. No shadow slid across the floor. No foot stepped in. Only silence. Then the door eased shut again, slow, controlled, the way a person closes a door when they want you to know they were there. When it clicked, I exhaled so sharply it hurt. I got up, locked the cabinet out of pure instinct, and carried the notebook to my bedroom like it was a living thing. I sat on the edge of my bed, the envelope and receipt beside me, the notebook open in my lap. If Elara built a trail, she built it for a reason. And if someone had just tested my door like that, the reason wasn't sentimental. It was survival. That night, I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't make food. I didn't call anyone. I sat in the dark with the notebook and read. Not skimming. Reading the way you read a legal document when your future depends on it. Patterns started showing themselves. Every Tuesday had coordinates, but they weren't random. They lined up along the far edge of Seabright where the dunes were thickest. The same bench. The same lot. The same tide window. And then, every few months, another location appeared briefly, like a detour. A shed behind dunes. The entries around those day tours always had different notes. Not safe. Use the back path. He waited near the shed. Paid double. I copied the coordinates onto a scrap of paper. Then I searched through Elara's drawer for the old beach map she used to keep, the one she claimed helped her avoid the crowded spots. I found it rolled up behind a stack of magazines. The map had small pencil marks. Dots. A line. Like a route. and right at the far end of that route was the shed. The next morning, my hands still felt like they weren't fully attached to me, but I forced myself to drive back to the beach. Not because I wanted to. Because if I didn't, I'd spend the rest of my life staring at that notebook and never sleeping again. The parking lot was already filling when I arrived. Lot C, just like the receipt. I parked and sat there for a moment with the engine off. The world outside looked ordinary. That was the most disturbing part. People laughed. People argued over sunscreen. Kids ran barefoot like the universe had never been cruel. I walked toward the dunes, but this time I didn't go to the lifeguard stand. I didn't want to be told I was late again. Instead, I went straight to the warning sign and past it, following the pencil route on the map. The dunes rose like ribs around a hollow chest. The wind sounded different back there. Lower. More private. The ocean was still visible, but muted. And then I saw it. The shed. Half swallowed by sand, rusted hinges, warped wood. It looked abandoned, but abandonment can be staged. That's what I'd learned in one day. I circled it slowly. Behind it, carved into the wood, were initials. Not new. Not fresh. Old enough to have been worn by wind. DCRC. My initials. And my younger brother's. Rafe. My throat tightened so hard it felt like my body was trying to stop me from breathing. Rafe and I were raised in the same house, but he always lived like rules were for other people. He could smile his way out of anything. He could charm a stranger into trusting him in 5 minutes. And he had been at my house after the funeral, pacing, asking about Alara's things like a man checking whether a safe was still locked. I pressed my fingers against the carved letters. A memory tried to surface. A teenage day. The beach. A fight. Sand in my teeth. Rafe laughing too loudly. Someone crying. I stepped back, dizzy. A voice cut through the wind. You shouldn't be back there. I turned fast. An older man stood near the dune path holding a rake, the kind of beach maintenance worker who knows more than he says. His shirt was sun-faded. His eyes were sharp. I'm not doing anything, I said. He studied my face, then his gaze dropped to the notebook tucked under my arm. His expression changed. Just slightly. You're her husband, he said. I didn't answer, because my voice would have cracked. He nodded once, like he'd confirmed something in his head. She always came alone. She did, I said, and the words came out bitter. He scratched his jaw with the handle of the rake. She Saturday. Waited. Left. Same time, same day. Like clockwork. What did she do? I asked. He looked toward the dunes, then back at me. She didn't do much. That's what scared me. She looked like someone waiting for permission to go home. My fingers tightened around the notebook. Did anyone meet her? He hesitated. That hesitation was an answer. Yes, I said. He exhaled. A man. Sometimes two. They didn't come from the main path. They came from the dunes. Like they didn't want the lifeguards noticing. My stomach rolled. Did you ever see his face? I asked. The worker's eyes narrowed. Not clearly. But I saw his posture. His confidence. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Listen. This isn't my business. I have grandkids. I don't want trouble. I don't want trouble either, I said, and it was the truth. I just want to understand why my wife. He cut me off gently. Your wife didn't look like she was here for joy. The ocean wind pressed against my ears, loud enough to hide the sound of my heartbeat, but not loud enough to hide what the worker said next. She looked like she was paying for something she didn't do. I stared at him. Do you know what it was? He shook his head. No. But I know this. He pointed toward the third bench, far down the line. Sometimes, after they left, she'd sit there with her hat in her lap. Not on her head. In her lap. Like she was holding on to herself. My throat burned. Ilara sat in the sun like a prisoner pretending to be on vacation. The worker shifted his rake and started backing away. Be careful, he said. If you're asking these questions now, it means she stopped answering them. I swallowed. What does that mean? He looked me dead in the eye. It means whoever she was paying, doesn't get paid anymore. Then he walked away, leaving me standing by a shed with my initials and my brother's carved into it like a confession. I walked toward the third bench again, slower than yesterday, scanning the dune line. My nerves were stretched thin, like wire pulled too tight. The bench was empty. The hat was gone. But something else was there. A small object wedged between the wooden slats. I reached down and pulled it free. A key. Not a house key. A locker key. Attached to it was a faded plastic tag that read, Seabright Pier Storage. Unit 12. My hands went cold. Because Alara's notebook didn't mention any storage unit. Which meant one of two things. Either she didn't know it existed. Or she knew, and she didn't want it written down. That night, the hospital room smelled like antiseptic and quiet. Cool blue-gray light made the corners of the room look deeper than they were. The monitor by my bed blinked steadily, a tiny green rhythm that sounded louder in the dark. The black woman who'd been checking on me, the night nurse with calm hands and eyes that didn't flinch, adjusted my blanket without a word. Her face stayed mostly in shadow, but I could see the outline of her cheekbones, the set of her jaw. She watched me the way a person watches someone holding back a storm. A second nurse stood further back near the door, blurred, reading a chart, giving us space like this room had its own rules. I swallowed, my throat still tight, even now, even here. Every Tuesday, I murmured. 40 years. The nurse in shadow didn't ask questions. She didn't interrupt. She just stayed. And somehow that made it easier to speak. I didn't confront the man at the beach again, I said quietly. I confronted my blood. Because by the time I left Seabright with that storage key in my pocket, I knew the truth was circling one name. Rafe. I drove to his house without calling. His neighborhood looked too clean for the kind of secret I was carrying. Trim lawns. Fresh paint. A porch swing that moved in the wind like a lie. He opened the door before I reached the top step, like he'd been watching from the window. That was my first confirmation. Darius, he said, forcing a warmth that didn't fit his eyes. You okay? I didn't step inside. I held the notebook up where he could see it. His gaze flicked to it, fast. Too practiced. Then he smiled wider, like he could smile his way out of paper and ink. What's that? He asked. A normal person would have asked why I was at his door. A normal person would have said Alara's name. Would have offered condolences again. Would have looked tired from grief. Rafe looked like a man bracing for accounting. You know what it is, I said. He laughed lightly. I swear, you're scaring me. You were at my house after the funeral, I said. You asked about her things. I was trying to help. You were pacing, I said. Like you were waiting for someone to show up. His smile tightened. You're imagining things. I watched him carefully, the way you watch someone crossing thin ice. You ever go to Seabright? I asked. He blinked once, then shrugged. Years ago. It's a beach. People go to beaches. Do you remember the shed? I asked. His eyes sharpened for a fraction of a second before he smoothed them again. What shed? He said too quickly. There it was. The lie that came too fast. I stepped closer. Our initials are carved into it, Rafe. His jaw flexed. He swallowed. Then he did what he always did when cornered. He tried to change the story before I could pin it down. Look, he said, sighing like he was the tired one. If Alara had some weird ritual, that's her thing. She was always intense about guilt and responsibility. Maybe she donated to something. Maybe she had some little private vow. I don't know. He spoke smoothly, like he'd rehearsed it. Guilt. Responsibility. Private vow. He was offering me a clean explanation that sounded plausible to someone desperate not to see dirt. But I wasn't desperate anymore. I was past desperate. I opened the notebook to a page I'd marked. Held it up between us. Alara wrote your name, I said. Rafe's face didn't go white. He was too good for that. But his pupils tightened. He took a breath through his nose and nodded slowly, like a man trying to appear calm while his spine is turning to water. She was stressed, he said. She wrote a lot of things. She wrote, I continued, reading directly, Rafe came early today. He said the same thing again. He thinks I won't notice. Rafe laughed again, but it sounded wrong. Dry. Empty. She was grieving, Darius. You know how she got. She could spiral. She wrote, I interrupted, if I stop, he will come for Darius. That line landed hard in the space between us. Rafe's smile vanished. For the first time, his eyes looked old. What are you doing? He said softly. Why are you doing this? I stared at him. Because I went to the third bench. His throat moved. I saw the moment he realized I had stepped into the part of the story Alara had been holding shut for decades. You shouldn't have gone there, he said. The sentence slipped out before he could stop it. And in that slip, he confessed something without meaning to. I leaned in. How do you know where there is? Rafe's mouth opened, then closed. He blinked once, fast. Then he tried to recover with anger, the second tool in his kit when charm failed. Don't do this, he snapped. Don't turn her death into some conspiracy. I pulled the storage key from my pocket and held it up. His eyes locked on it instantly. Not confusion. Recognition. That was the second confession. He knew what it was. He knew where it belonged. And he knew I wasn't supposed to have it. Where did you get that? He demanded. I didn't answer. His breathing quickened. You went to the pier, he said. I watched him carefully. I didn't say anything about the pier. Rafe froze. Just for a beat. But it was enough. He knew. He knew too much. He knew the beach, the bench, the shed, the pier, the unit. He knew the shape of my wife's Tuesdays like it was his schedule too. I stepped back, keeping my voice low. Tell me what you did. His face twisted, and for a moment the brother I grew up with was gone. In his place was someone sharper. Someone who had been managing consequences for a long time. You don't understand, he said, almost pleading. You don't know what she saved you from. What she saved me from, I said slowly, or what you dragged her into. His eyes flashed. She chose it. The words hit me so hard I felt them in my teeth. She chose to spend 40 years paying someone? I asked. Rafe's lips pressed tight. Then he did something that told me I was closer than I'd ever been. He looked past me, down the street, as if calculating whether he had time. Time for what? To run? To call someone? To warn them? I turned my head slightly, following his gaze. A car idled at the curb across from his house. Engine on. Someone inside. Waiting. My skin went cold again, the same freeze I felt at the bench. Rafe lowered his voice. Go home, Darius. Why? I whispered. His eyes flicked to the notebook, then to the car, then back to me. Because if you open that storage unit, he said, you won't be able to close it again. And in that moment, I realized the betrayal wasn't just in the past. It was active. It was watching. And it knew I was finally asking questions. I backed away from Rafe's porch slowly, keeping my eyes on the idling car. The windshield reflected the evening sky, hiding the driver's face. But the posture behind the wheel looked familiar. Confident. Like someone who'd been waiting at beaches and benches for a very long time. Then the car's headlights blinked once. Not an accident. A signal. And Rafe's voice came low behind me, almost a warning. He knows you're awake now. The next Tuesday came like a dare. I tried to tell myself I didn't need to go back. That I'd already seen enough. That grief had turned my brain into a machine that would chew anything into paranoia if I fed it. But then I remembered the car across from Rafe's house. The headlights blinking once like a quiet signal. And I remembered the note tucked into Alara's hat. Tuesday. 9 p.m. home. Don't bring anyone. Home. They weren't just watching the beach. They were watching my life. That Tuesday morning, I woke before dawn, not from a noise, but from the feeling of being observed. The house was still. The air felt heavy. I stood at the kitchen window and stared out into the street. Nothing. No car. No shadow. That was the worst kind of nothing. I took the notebook out and opened to the last entry again. Last payment. It's over. My hands shook, not from fear, but from rage. She wrote it like a finish line, like she believed she had finally bought freedom. And 3 days later, she was dead. The thought sat in my chest like a stone. I didn't tell Rafe I was going. I didn't tell anyone. If someone was tracking my moves, they would learn only what I chose to show. I drove to Seabright and parked in Lot C, same row, same distance from the boardwalk. I made myself sit in the car for a minute, forcing my breathing to stay steady. Then I walked straight toward the dunes. The warning sign was still crooked. The sand still soft. The bench line still quiet once you moved far enough away from families and noise. But today, everything felt sharper. Like the world had turned up its contrast. I reached the third bench on Saturday. Not on it. Behind it. In the shade of the dunes where my silhouette wouldn't stand out. I tucked my shoulders forward, made my body smaller, and watched the paths where someone could approach. Time passed in slow pieces. A man walked a dog. A couple took selfies. A kid chased a gull until the gull gave up and flew away. Nothing happened. Then the wind shifted. And I heard footsteps that didn't belong to anyone strolling. Measured. Direct. I didn't look right away. I let the sound come closer. Let it confirm itself. A shadow crossed the sand in front of the bench. Then a voice spoke, low and annoyed, like we were late for an appointment. "You're not her." My stomach tightened, but I kept my face calm. I raised my head slowly. The man who stood there was different from the first man. Older. Thinner. His skin looked weathered, not from sun but from years of not sleeping enough. He wore sunglasses even though the sky was cloudy, and his mouth was set like a person used to being obeyed. He scanned me quickly. Then he stared at my hands. At the notebook I kept closed on my lap. His jaw tightened. "Where is she?" "She died," I said. He didn't react the way people react to death. No sympathy. No surprise. Just calculation. He nodded once as if checking off a box. "So," he said, "she finally stopped paying." My fingers dug into the notebook cover. "What did she pay for?" His head tilted. "You don't know." "No," I said. "And I'm done pretending that's normal." He stepped closer. Sand shifted under his shoes. "You should walk away." I held his gaze. "And if I don't?" He leaned down slightly, voice dropping. "Then you'll learn why she was terrified of Tuesdays." My heart thudded once, hard. I forced my voice steady. "She wasn't terrified. She looked calm." He laughed quietly. "It wasn't humor. It was contempt. That was her best skill," he said. Looking calm while she kept the storm in her mouth. I swallowed. "Who made her do it?" His sunglasses reflected the ocean, hiding his eyes. "You're asking the wrong question." "What's the right one?" He straightened. "How long did it take you to notice she was gone?" The question hit harder than it should have. I felt anger rise, but also shame. Because the truth was, I didn't notice on Tuesdays. I accepted them. I built my life around her absence. I didn't ask questions because questions felt like accusing. He watched my expression shift and nodded, satisfied. "She chose you," he said. "And she paid for you." I clenched my jaw. "For what?" He paused. Then he pointed toward the dune line with one finger. "Follow me," he said. "Not to the shed. Somewhere safer." I didn't move. He noticed. "You think I'm the danger," he said. "I'm the messenger." "Then message me right here." He exhaled like I was exhausting him. "Fine." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope, sealed. He held it at arm's length, like he didn't want it too close to his skin. "This was meant for her," he said. "She told me if she ever didn't show up, I had to deliver it to you. But only if you came alone." A cold thread ran down my spine. Ilara planned this. Not just the hat. Not just the receipt. This too. I didn't reach for it yet. "What is it?" "A warning," he said. "About who?" He hesitated. That hesitation was the real answer. "About your family," he said finally. My throat went tight. "Rafe?" His lips pressed into a thin line. "You said it, not me." The ocean roared behind us like it was trying to drown out the name. I stared at the envelope. "Why didn't you stop her?" He gave a bitter smile. "Stop her? She was the only reason you were still breathing in peace." I stepped forward and snatched the envelope. He didn't resist. Inside was a single sheet of paper with Ilara's handwriting. Not neat this time. Shaky. Urgent. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone. Do not trust Rafe. Do not open Unit 12 alone. And whatever you do, don't let him learn you found the notebook." My hands went numb. Because the notebook was exactly what someone had tried to reach for in my house. I looked up, my voice low. "Why Unit 12? The man's jaw clenched. "That unit is where your wife stored what she couldn't say out loud." "Like what?" He looked past me toward the main beach where families walked and laughed. Then he spoke quietly. "The truth about the first Tuesday." My chest tightened. "What happened the first Tuesday?" He didn't answer immediately. He took a step back, as if distance could protect him. Then he said the sentence that snapped something inside me. "She started paying because someone threatened to bring back what your brother did." The sand seemed to tilt under my feet. "What did he do?" I whispered. The man's lips parted. Then his head snapped up, sharp. His body stiffened like a hunted animal. He turned his head slightly, listening. I followed his gaze toward the dunes. A figure stood there, half hidden by the sand ridge. Not close enough to see clearly. Close enough to know we weren't alone. The man in sunglasses took another step back. "You didn't come alone," he hissed. "I did," I said. But he wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at the dunes. And the fear on his face wasn't about me. It was about whoever had just arrived. He lowered his voice to a whisper. If you want to survive this, he said, you stop calling it grief and start calling it war. Then he turned and walked away fast, disappearing behind the dunes like the first man had. Leaving me alone at the third bench, clutching Ilara's warning, watching that distant figure stand still like a question waiting to be answered. And then my phone vibrated in my pocket. One text. No name. Just 4 words. Unit 12. Tonight. That night, the hospital room came back around me like a slow wave. Cool light. Machines blinking. The sound of my own breathing too loud in the dark. The nurse in shadow stood beside my bed, calm hands adjusting the 4-line like she had done it 100 times. The blurred nurse at the door checked something on a clipboard and left without speaking. I stared at the ceiling and tasted salt in my throat that didn't belong in a hospital. Unit 12, I whispered. The nurse in shadow looked at me, her face still mostly hidden, but her voice gentle when she finally spoke. Whatever it is, she said, don't carry it alone. I didn't answer. Because I had already failed at not being alone, in the only way that mattered. I left the hospital the next morning against advice. Not officially. Not dramatically. Just quietly, like a man stepping out of a room he no longer trusted. By evening, I was back at Seabright Pier, the air cold and damp. The storage unit sat behind a locked gate, rows of metal doors that looked identical, like secrets lined up to be ignored. Unit 12 was in the back row. Of course it was. I stood in front of it with the key in my palm. I didn't open it right away. I listened. No footsteps. No voices. No cars nearby. But I still felt watched. I slid the key in. The lock clicked. The metal door rolled up with a groan like the unit was alive and angry about being disturbed. Inside was a plastic tote, a sealed file box, and a small duffel bag. No furniture. No trash. No junk. Everything in there had a purpose. My hands moved slowly, carefully. I opened the file box first. Inside were envelopes, neatly labeled in Ilara's handwriting. Before you blame yourself. About Rafe. About your father. Do not read until you are ready. My throat tightened at the last one. About the boy. The boy. That was what the man at the bench said. Your son. I swallowed hard and set that envelope aside. Not yet. I opened the tote. Inside were copies of bank withdrawal slips, folded and clipped together by year. Cash withdrawals every Tuesday. Same amount, adjusted slowly upward over decades. Ilara wasn't just paying. She was being priced. Then I found something that made my skin go cold. A photograph. Not the beach photo the man showed me. This one was clearer. It showed the third bench from a distance. Ilara sitting there. And behind her, partially hidden in the dunes, a man with a familiar posture. Confident. Loose shoulders. The way he leaned. My stomach dropped. Because I recognized that posture. I'd seen it 1,000 times at family gatherings. Rafe. My hands trembled so hard the photo rattled. Then, underneath the photo, was a typed letter with a signature at the bottom. Not a lawyer letterhead. Not official. Still, it was carefully written, like someone who understood fear and contracts. Agreement of silence. Failure to comply will result in disclosure. And attached to the letter was a copy of an old police report. A report I'd never seen. A report dated back to when I was 17. I read it once. Then again. The words blurred. Unreported incident, witness statement recorded, suspect, male, teenage, known associate, victim declined to proceed. Victim. I didn't remember there being a victim. My memory had always been framed as an accident. A scuffle. Teen chaos. A bad day at the beach that our family moved past. But this report wasn't an accident. This report was a crime. And the witness statement was signed by a name that made my chest seize. My father. My father had given a statement. My father had been there. And then he vanished from our lives not long after. I stood in front of Unit 12 with the paper shaking in my hands, feeling the past rearrange itself. Rafe didn't just do something wrong. Rafe did something that forced my wife to spend 40 years paying for silence. And my father knew. That was why he disappeared. Or why he was made to disappear. My phone buzzed again. Another text. You see it now. I spun around, heart pounding. No one. Only the rows of metal doors and the sound of waves slapping wood out on the pier. I grabbed the duffel bag and unzipped it. Inside was Ilara's sunhat. And beneath it, a small digital voice recorder. I pressed play. Static. Then Ilara's voice, low and shaky, like she was recording in a bathroom with the faucet running. Darius, she whispered. If you found this, then I didn't make it to the next Tuesday. My throat closed. I'm sorry, her voice continued. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I thought I could carry it alone. I thought if I paid long enough, it would end. A pause. A sharp inhale. Rafe is not the one you need to fear most. My blood ran cold. Because I'd been aiming my rage at one name. Rafe started it, she said. But he didn't control it. He was controlled. Another pause. Then she said the sentence that made my knees weaken. The man you met at the bench works for someone who shares your blood. My vision blurred. Not Rafe? Who else? Ilara's voice dropped to a whisper. The reason I went every Tuesday, the reason I paid, was because if I didn't, they would take the boy. The boy. She said it like it was a real person. Not a metaphor. Not a trick. My hands trembled. Ilara. I pressed the recorder closer, like I could pull her back. I didn't want you to know, she said. Because I didn't want you to choose. Choose what? Because if you knew, she whispered, you would have destroyed your own family. Then the recording cut off. I stood there shaking, staring into the open storage unit, and for the first time in my life I understood something simple and terrifying. Ilara didn't hide this because she didn't trust me. She hid it because she knew exactly what I would do. And now she was gone. So the decision was mine. When I drove home from the pier, I didn't feel like I was driving. I felt like I was being delivered. Every street light looked too bright. Every shadow looked too deliberate. I parked in my driveway and sat for a long time with the engine off, listening to the ticking of cooling metal. Then I took the envelope labeled about Rafe. And I opened it. Inside was a single page, handwritten. Rafe is not brave. He is charming. He doesn't fight. He negotiates. He doesn't protect. He bargains, and he has been bargaining with your life since you were 17. I read that last line twice. 17. The age I'd been when the beach incident happened. The age I'd been when my father disappeared. The age I'd been when my mother stopped asking questions because questions made her eyes look tired. I sat on the edge of my bed and let the memory come. Not the version I'd told myself. The real one. It was a Tuesday. Not because we planned it. Because we were bored and reckless and Rafe wanted to impress someone. We drove to Seabright with cheap drinks and loud music and the kind of confidence teenage boys mistake for invincibility. Rafe was the center of everything back then. He could make you feel like the world was a stage built just for him. I followed him. That day, a girl was with us. Not someone from school. Someone Rafe met in a parking lot and pulled into our orbit like it was easy. I remember her face clearly now. Not because I wanted to. Because my brain had tried to bury it and failed. She was quiet. Older than us. And she didn't smile with her eyes. We ended up near the dunes, away from the main crowd, near that shed. Rafe wanted privacy. Wanted to show off. Wanted to do something stupid and prove he could. I remember arguing with him. Telling him to leave her alone. Telling him to stop acting like he owned people. He laughed. He always laughed. Then there was shouting. And then something happened fast. A push. A stumble. A fall. Sand kicked up. The girl screamed. And Rafe's face changed from playful to scared in half a second. That was the moment he became dangerous. Not because he was violent. Because he was afraid of consequences. The next memory is my father. He came out of nowhere, like he'd been watching. Like he'd followed us because he didn't trust Rafe. My father grabbed Rafe hard, shook him once, furious. I remember his eyes. Not angry. Terrified. Then my father looked at me and said something I never forgot. Go to the car, Darius. I went. And I didn't look back. That was my sin. The next day, my father was gone. No note. No call. No goodbye. My mother tried to file a missing person report. She was told it would take time. Then she started getting anonymous phone calls in the evenings. Silent calls. Breathing. One time, a voice said a single sentence. Stop asking. She stopped. We all stopped. And we pretended my father had simply chosen to disappear. A selfish man. A weak man. A man who left. That story was easier than the truth. But now Unit 12 had changed that. Now the police report had changed that. Now Ilara's recorder had changed that. My father didn't leave. He knew something. And then he vanished. I sat in my room with my wife's notebook on my lap and the betrayal in my blood, and I understood why Elara wrote. You would have destroyed your own family. Because I wanted to. I wanted to drag Rafe into the light and show him what 40 years of Tuesdays cost. But then Elara's words echoed. Rafe started it. But he didn't control it. He was controlled. So who controlled him? That night, I drove to my mother's house. I hadn't planned to. But I needed to hear her voice. Needed to see her eyes. Needed to know whether she knew. She opened the door wearing a robe, her hair wrapped, looking smaller than I remembered. Grief had been sitting on her shoulders for years, not just because of my father. She saw my face and her expression tightened. You went to the beach, she said. I froze. What? I whispered. She blinked slowly. Elara said if you ever came here with that look, it meant you found it. Found it? The notebook? The truth? My hands shook. You knew? Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. I knew enough to be afraid, she said quietly. Not enough to be brave. I swallowed. Who is him? She looked down the hallway like she didn't want to say the name inside her own house. Then she whispered it. Not Rafe. Not my father. Another name. A name I hadn't heard in years. My uncle. My father's brother. The man who stepped in after my father vanished. The man who handled family issues. The man who paid our bills for a while. The man who told my mother to stop asking questions and start being grateful. My hands went numb. My mother's voice shook. He said he was protecting us. Protecting us. That was always the word. Elara paid to protect me. My uncle claimed he protected the family. Rafe claimed he did it for the family. Protection was the prettiest lie betrayal ever wore. I stepped back from my mother's doorway, the world swaying. She reached for my arm. Darius, don't. But she stopped herself. Because she saw in my face what Elara saw. The moment love turns into judgment. The moment grief turns into intent. I'm not going to do something reckless, I said. My mother's mouth trembled. Promise. I looked at her and realized something else. The most dangerous people aren't the ones who hurt you. They're the ones who convince your whole family it's safer to pretend. I nodded slowly. I promise. Then I turned and walked back into the night. And in my pocket, the storage key dug into my palm like a reminder. I wasn't going to be reckless. I was going to be precise. Precision requires patience. And patience is hard when your chest is full of fire. I didn't go back to the beach on Tuesday. Not right away. I didn't want to be predictable. If my uncle still had eyes on Seabright, I wasn't going to feed him a pattern he could use. Instead, I made calls. Not emotional calls. Practical ones. I contacted an attorney, not a family friend, not someone demonstrable to be tied to my uncle. Someone outside the orbit. I didn't give him the whole story over the phone. I gave him enough to make him curious, and I asked him to come to my house for a confidential review of documents. He arrived 2 days later, briefcase in hand, face neutral. His name was Gideon March. Not warm. Not cold. Just professional. I liked him immediately for that. I laid the notebook, the withdrawal slips, the agreement letter, and the recorder on my dining table like pieces of a puzzle no one wanted solved. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said one sentence. This isn't grief, he said. This is extortion. Hearing it in a clean word made my stomach twist. Gideon tapped the table lightly. You want revenge? I didn't flinch. I want the truth to have consequences. He nodded, slow. Then you don't confront. You document. He helped me set a trap that didn't look like a trap. A meeting request. A letter sent to my uncle's office. Formal language. Calm tone. It said I had found important materials related to Elara's estate and demonstrable financial discrepancies. It said I wanted to settle family matters privately before things became public. The lie was simple. It dangled what he wanted most. Control. My uncle responded within an hour. He asked to meet that night. Not tomorrow. Not next week. That night. Urgency is always the tell. Gideon's eyes didn't change when I told him. He simply said, good. We staged my house the way you stage a room for truth. 2 chairs at the dining table. A folder of documents placed neatly in the center. The recorder placed casually near a stack of condolence cards like it was nothing. And a witness. Not hiding in a closet. Not silly. Not theatrical. Gideon arranged for a neutral third party to be present in the house, someone who could legally attest to what was said. A quiet older woman named Nola Pierce, a paralegal with sharp eyes and a calm mouth. She sat in the den with the door cracked, within hearing distance but not visible from the dining room. The plan was simple. Let my uncle speak. People reveal themselves when they think they are safe. That evening, the house felt too quiet. The wind rattled the window frames like fingers tapping. When headlights swept across my living room wall, my pulse steadied instead of spiking. Fear is loud when you don't have a plan. When you do, fear becomes a tool. My uncle knocked once. Not a hesitant knock. A knock that assumed the door would open. I opened it. He stood there in a tailored coat, face smooth, eyes bright with a controlled sympathy that used to fool me. "Darius," he said warmly, stepping in without waiting for an invitation. "My condolences." He looked past me, scanning the house like he was checking corners. I closed the door behind him. "I'm glad you came," I said evenly. His gaze flicked to the dining table. "You said you found something." I gestured. "Sit." He sat today. And for a moment, the scene looked like family. That was the danger. He rested his hands on the table, fingers interlaced, posture relaxed. Then he smiled. "Your wife was complicated," he said. "But she loved you." The words were a test. A probe. I didn't react. He continued, voice gentle. "What did you find, Darius?" I slid the notebook across the table. His eyes landed on it. And for the first time, his composure slipped. Not much. Just a tightening at the corners of his mouth. Then he recovered quickly, picking it up as if it belonged to him. He flipped through pages without reading. He was checking. Looking for what I knew. "What is this?" he asked, too calmly. "It's 40 years of Tuesdays," I said. He set the notebook down, exhaled softly. "And I know she paid," I said. "I know she was threatened." My uncle tilted his head. "Threatened by who?" I held his gaze. "That's what I invited you here to explain." His eyes narrowed. "Darius, be careful. Grief can make people imagine patterns." I almost laughed. He used the same line Rafe did. Same language. Same framing. That's when I knew my uncle had coached him. Had fed him the script. I leaned forward slightly. "I have Unit 12. My uncle's eyes flickered. Just once. But it was enough. He tried to cover it with a sympathetic sigh. "I don't know what that means." I reached into the folder and pulled out the agreement letter. I slid it across the table. His hand moved toward it. I stopped him with my voice. "Don't touch it," I said quietly. He paused. Then he smiled, a little tighter. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, voice still warm, but sharper underneath. "What do you want?" The question was the crack. Because it revealed he understood what this was. Not a grieving husband asking questions. A man bringing receipts. I said it plainly. "I want you to say it out loud," I said. "What you did to my wife." For the first time, the warmth drained from his eyes. And he leaned back in his chair like the mask had become inconvenient. "Your wife made choices," he said. "She protected you." My throat tightened. "From what?" He smiled thinly. "From your brother's mistakes." I held his gaze. "And my father?" His expression hardened. That name did something in the air. He didn't answer immediately. Then he said softly, "Your father was weak." My hands clenched under the table. "And Ilara?" I asked. "Was she weak too?" He stared at me, irritation flashing. "Ilara was loyal." Loyal. The word again. He leaned forward, voice dropping. "Let me give you advice, Darius. Put that notebook away. Let your wife rest. And let the family move on." He reached out suddenly, grabbing for the notebook. Fast. Instinctive. Not calm anymore. I moved quicker, pulling it back, and in the same moment Gideon stepped into the dining room doorway. My uncle's eyes snapped to him, surprise flickering. Then Nola's voice came from the den, calm and clear. "Everything said tonight is being documented." My uncle froze. Not fear. Fury. He stood so fast the chair scraped the floor. "You set me up," he hissed. I stood too, voice low. "You set my wife up for 40 years. His face twisted. And then he did the one thing that confirmed he wasn't here to grieve or explain. He lunged toward the recorder. To destroy it. His hand hit the recorder like a slap. Plastic skittered across the table. But Gideon moved faster. He caught it mid-slide, calm as a man catching a falling pen. My uncle's eyes flashed with something ugly. The mask was gone now. No more sympathy. No more warmth. No more family first. Showtime was over. You think you're smart, my uncle said, voice low and dangerous. You think you can play games with me in your own house. I didn't raise my voice. That would have given him what he wanted. Instead, I opened the notebook to a page I had marked with a red tab. And you think, I said evenly, you can explain 40 years with one word. He stared at the page and didn't read it. He didn't need to. Because he knew what it contained. Gideon's voice was calm. Sir, you should sit. My uncle laughed once. A sharp sound. You're not in charge here. Then he turned to me, eyes hard. You don't even know what you're holding, he said. You don't know what your wife prevented. I swallowed. Tell me. He hesitated. And for the first time, I saw something beneath his control. Not guilt. Not shame. Fear. Because for all his power, he was still afraid of one thing. Being exposed. He leaned forward, lowering his voice like this was an intimate secret. Your brother did something, he said. Something that would have destroyed you too if it came out. Your wife understood that. She wasn't stupid. My wife wasn't your employee, I said. He smiled coldly. She acted like one. The words hit me like a punch. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I simply reached into the folder and pulled out the copy of the old police report. I slid it across the table. My uncle's eyes landed on it. And this time, his composure cracked for real. His throat moved. His lips pressed tight. You found that, he said. Yes, I replied. And you also found the witness statement, Gideon said calmly. My uncle's gaze snapped to Gideon. You don't know what you're talking about. Gideon didn't flinch. We know enough. Nola stepped into the doorway now, her posture straight, eyes sharp. My uncle looked from face to face and realized he wasn't surrounded by family anymore. He was surrounded by consequence. His voice rose slightly. You think the police will care about some old report? You think the world is fair? Your wife understood reality. I spoke softly. My wife understood fear. My uncle's jaw clenched. Fear keeps people alive. And it kept you comfortable, I said. Silence. The air felt like a wire pulled tight. Then my uncle did something I didn't expect. He smiled. Not the warm smile. A small, satisfied one. Like he had been waiting for me to arrive at this exact moment. Darius, he said, voice almost gentle, your wife never told you everything. My skin chilled. What do you mean? He leaned closer, and his eyes gleamed. She didn't just pay to protect you, he whispered. She paid to protect what you didn't even know existed. The words hit me hard. I thought of the envelope labeled about the boy. I hadn't opened it. My uncle watched my face and nodded slowly, like he could see my thoughts. You didn't open it, he murmured. Of course you didn't. You're still trying to believe there's a clean ending. My throat went tight. Then he straightened and reached into his coat pocket. Gideon's hand lifted slightly, alert. But my uncle didn't pull a weapon. He pulled out a phone. He tapped the screen twice. Then he set it on the table and slid it toward me. A photo filled the screen. A teenage boy. Dark hair. My eyes. My jawline. Older than the child in the beach photo, but unmistakably connected to me in a way that made my blood turn to ice. My uncle's voice was quiet. That, he said, is why your wife paid. I stared at the photo until my vision blurred. I don't have a son, I whispered. My uncle's smile widened. You do. Gideon's voice cut in, controlled but firm. Sir, that's a serious claim. My uncle ignored him. Your father knew, he said to me. That's why he disappeared. He tried to pull the boy out of reach. My hands clenched. Where is he? My uncle's eyes narrowed. That depends. Depends on what? I demanded, my voice finally cracking. He leaned forward, voice dropping like poison. Depends on whether you want to keep pretending you're a good man, or whether you want to become like me. The rage inside me surged so fast my vision tunneled. But I didn't move. Because now I understood the trap. If I exploded, he'd frame me as unstable. As grieving. As dangerous. He wanted me to become the story. Instead, I picked up the phone carefully and turned it toward Gideon and Nola. Document that, I said. My uncle's smile faltered for the first time. Because he realized I wasn't playing his game. I was building a case. He stood abruptly, anger spilling now. You think you can threaten me with paperwork? I stepped closer, calm. I'm not threatening you, I said quietly. I'm ending you. His face flushed. You can't. I held his gaze. Watch. And then I did the thing Elara knew I would do. I reached into the folder and pulled out one last item. The voice recorder. I pressed play. Elara's voice filled the room. Not shaky this time. Clear. Determined. If you're hearing this, she said, it means Darius finally knows. My uncle froze. His face went blank. Elara's voice continued. And if you're listening too, she said, and there was no doubt who she meant, you should understand something. A pause. Then. I stopped paying because I recorded everything. My uncle's eyes flashed with panic. Elara's voice stayed calm. I wrote down names. Dates. Places. I kept copies. I hid them where you can't reach them in time. My uncle lunged again. But Gideon was ready. He stepped between us, firm, and Nola lifted her phone, already calling. Elara's voice kept going, relentless. And Darius, she said softly, I'm sorry. I wanted to spare you this choice. But you deserve the truth more than you deserve peace. The recording clicked off. Silence crashed into the room. My uncle stared at me like I had turned into a stranger. Then he did something small and telling. He backed toward the door. Retreat. And as he reached the entryway, his eyes cut to me, hate sharp. This won't end how you think, he hissed. I followed him, voice low. It already ended. 40 years ago. You just didn't know it yet. He opened the door and stepped into the night. And in the distance, I heard sirens begin to rise. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just real. Consequences moving through streets. My uncle paused on the porch and looked back once. Then he said one final line, his voice soft enough to chill me. Ask yourself why the boy has your eyes. Then he turned and disappeared into the dark, leaving that question hanging in my doorway like a curse. And behind me, on the dining table, Elara's notebook lay open like a map, pointing to the last place I hadn't been brave enough to go. The envelope labeled. About the boy. The last time I saw my uncle, he stepped off my porch like a man leaving a room he still believed he owned. Sirens rose in the distance, faint at first, then louder, threading through the night like a consequence finally waking up. Gideon stood beside me, calm, while Nola spoke quietly into her phone in the den, her voice steady as she gave details. My hands didn't shake anymore. That surprised me. I thought I would be trembling with anger, grief, victory, something. But my body had moved past emotion into something colder. Focus. On the dining table, Elara's notebook lay open, the pages swollen with years of salt and fear. Beside it sat the envelope I had avoided since the storage unit. About the boy. My uncle's last words kept circling my head like a gull refusing to leave. Ask yourself why the boy has your eyes. For the first time, I understood why Elara hid this. Not because it was complicated. Because it was clean. A truth so clean it would cut straight through every excuse my family ever used. Gideon touched my shoulder lightly. You don't have to open that tonight. I looked at him. Yes, I do. Demons grow teeth in the dark. I sat down, slid the envelope toward me, and stared at the handwriting. Elara's hand. Familiar. Tender. And yet, the words on that envelope felt like a door. A door she kept closed for 40 years. I broke the seal. Inside were 3 things. A hospital bracelet, yellowed with age, the plastic stiff from time. A folded letter. And a second photograph. I picked up the bracelet first. My eyes went to the printed name. Not mine. Not Elara's. A name I didn't recognize at all. But beneath it, a date of birth that made my throat tighten. It matched the timeline. The year my father vanished. The year my mother stopped talking about him as if saying his name might summon him back. I unfolded the letter with careful hands. Elara wrote it in a steady script, but I could see where the pen pressed too hard, as if she was forcing herself not to shake. Darius. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and the silence has passed to you. I'm sorry I didn't tell you earlier. I didn't hide this because I didn't trust you. I hid it because I trusted you too much. I knew what you would do. I swallowed hard. Her words didn't comfort me. They aimed me. The boy is real. He is yours. My vision blurred so fast I had to blink hard to clear it. Gideon shifted slightly, but he didn't interrupt. He let the sentence sit in the room and settle into my bones. I read on. You were drugged the night of the beach incident. You remember the anger and the shouting, but you don't remember what happened after, because you couldn't. Rafe arranged it. He didn't intend what followed. But intent doesn't erase consequences. My skin went cold, not from fear now, but from a strange nausea, like my body was rejecting the past. Your father found out first. He tried to fix it quietly. He tried to protect you, but he made the mistake of thinking family meant safety. Your uncle found out next. He didn't protect you. He protected himself. My jaw tightened until my teeth ached. The boy was taken before you could ever know. Not by strangers. By people who knew exactly how to make a disappearance look like a choice. I found out years later by accident, through a woman who recognized your face. A pause in the handwriting, like Ilara had stopped to breathe. I promised her I would help keep the boy safe. I promised I would keep him out of your uncle's reach. That's why I went every Tuesday. The ocean came roaring back into my head. The bench. The hat. The dunes. Every Tuesday wasn't a retreat. It was a checkpoint. A payment. A negotiation. A shield. I kept reading. Your uncle didn't want the boy found. He didn't want proof of what happened. He used the boy as leverage. He used Rafe as a puppet. And he used me as a bank. He told me if I stopped paying, the boy would disappear forever. My throat closed. A sob tried to rise. It didn't make it out. I didn't cry. I froze. Because I could see it now. The shape of it. Ilara smiling in the kitchen on a Tuesday morning, packing her bag like it was nothing. Ilara at the third bench with her hat in her lap like she was holding her own heart steady. Ilara coming home, kissing my cheek, cooking dinner, pretending she didn't spend the day bargaining with monsters who shared my blood. My voice came out thin. Where is he? Ilara had answered that too. He is alive. I won't write where. If this letter is found, it will be weaponized. But I left you a path. Go to Seabright. Third bench. Tuesday. Bring the hat. Sit. Wait. Listen. I stared at that line. Same bench. Same day. Same ritual. Ilara was handing me the final Tuesday. The last transaction. Gideon's voice was low. Darius, if your uncle is involved, this is. I know, I said. My voice sounded like someone else's. But Ilara didn't build trails for nothing. I picked up the second photograph. It showed a teenager standing in front of a plain building, his face turned slightly away from the camera, like he didn't want to be photographed. But his eyes were visible. My eyes. I sat very still, the room narrowing around that photo. Nola returned quietly, her expression serious. Police have a unit on the way, she said. They're going to want everything. I nodded without looking up. Because in that moment, I understood the difference between justice and revenge. Justice is the system catching up. Revenge is you deciding what you will no longer tolerate. Ilara had done her version of revenge for 40 years. Not loud. Not bloody. Just relentless. She had kept someone alive. She had kept a truth contained until it could be used properly. Now it was my turn. The next Tuesday, I went back to Seabright. I didn't park in Lot C. I parked farther away, walked in from a different entrance, and kept my hood up. Not to be dramatic. To be smart. The hat was in my hands. It felt lighter than it should have, like it held more meaning than fabric. The third bench waited where it always waited, angled slightly away from the path. The dunes stood like watchers. I sat down. The ocean wind blew cold against my face. And I waited. Minutes passed. Then footsteps. Soft, careful. Someone approached from the dune side, not the main path. A shadow crossed the sand. A voice spoke behind me. I've been waiting to see if you'd come. I didn't turn too fast. I didn't speak too fast. I forced my body to stay controlled. Because Ilara's whole life had been control. I turned slowly. A young man stood there. Not a boy. Not a child. A young man, early 20s, posture guarded, eyes sharp with a kind of quiet skepticism you earn from being hidden too long. He looked at the hat in my hands. Then he looked at my face. And something shifted in his expression. Not warmth. Recognition. He swallowed. You're him, he said. My throat tightened. I'm Darius. He flinched at the name, like he'd heard it in warnings. He stepped closer, cautious. She said you'd have her eyes when you finally knew. My chest squeezed. Ilara, I whispered. His face softened just slightly. She saved me, he said. Every Tuesday. I didn't move. I couldn't. The world had shrunk to the space between us. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. A folded note. Ilara's handwriting. He held it out like it was sacred. She told me, he said, if you showed up, it means she's gone. I took it with shaking fingers. The note was short. Is not your punishment. Is your chance. That line broke something in me. Not into tears. Into truth. I looked up at the young man again. What's your name? I asked. He hesitated, then said it. Not a common name. Not a neat name. A name that sounded like it had survived. Cairo, he said. Cairo. I repeated it silently, tasting it like a prayer. He studied my face. They'll come, he warned. Your uncle's people. They watch this beach. I know, I said quietly. And that was the moment the final piece clicked. Ilara stopped paying because she didn't plan to survive. She planned for me to inherit the war. But she also gave me the one thing she never had. A choice. I stood slowly. Cairo stiffened, ready to run. I lifted the hat and set it on the bench gently, the way someone sets down a burden. Then I took the notebook out of my bag. Not to show him. To end something. I opened it to the last page. Last payment. It's over. I held it out toward the ocean wind. And I let the pages flip wildly, the ink blurring in the salt air. Then I closed it and tucked it back into my bag. Not burned. Not destroyed. Evidence belongs to the truth, not to rage. I turned to Cairo. We're leaving, I said. He blinked. Where? I looked back once at the bench, at the dunes, at the place that stole 40 years from my wife. Then I said, somewhere Tuesdays mean nothing. We walked away together, not running, not hiding, just moving with purpose. Behind us, the ocean kept breathing. And for the first time since Ilara died, the air in my lungs didn't feel like a prison. In the hospital room that night, when they settled me back into bed, the nurse in shadow adjusted my blanket again. Calm. Composed. A silent witness to the end of a long story. The blurred nurse at the door checked my chart and left. I stared at the ceiling and finally let the last truth settle. My wife went to the beach every Tuesday for 40 years. When she died, I found out why. And I didn't scream. I didn't collapse. I froze. Because I realized the most terrifying thing wasn't what my family did. It was what my wife endured to keep me from becoming the kind of man who could do it too. But now the truth was out. And the Tuesdays were over.